Hi, Jason. Thank you for joining us today from the White Oak Initiative. Jason Meyer is their new executive director. Welcome, and thanks for speaking to me and the Forestry Source today. Tell us a bit about your background.
Yeah, sure, Morgan. So first of all, thanks for making a little bit of time for me today. I definitely appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the White Oak Initiative, which is just an incredible, effort happening out there related to white oak management. We'll be talking about that. But my background, to keep a long story short, is that I went to forestry school because, well, I wanted to be a forester and be out in the woods and never have to talk to people, right? Like that was my
Right.
dream. I would just make money playing in the woods. And I think that most foresters would agree with me that that is not at all what a career in forestry is like. And in fact, every single day of my career, I've been talking to people. So I spent some time with the U.S. Forest Service out in Idaho as a timber marker. When I was out there, I ran into some folks that didn't really appreciate the idea of cutting trees. And I figured out that I didn't have the tools or the skills to communicate with them about why I was doing what I was doing. And that really put me on a track towards educating people about forest management, right? And so I spent some time with a nonprofit in Southern California working with kids on the San Bernardino National Forest. Then I transitioned over to CAL FIRE and did some work with private landowners on forest health and fire safety. That was a great job. And then I turned towards environmental education because I really saw the value in helping kids understand what it meant to use forest products and what conservation was versus preservation. So I ended up running a couple of nature centers here in Michigan. I'm coming in from Grand Rapids, Michigan today. And then post COVID, I decided I needed to do something a little bit different. So that's how I ended up, here at the White Oak Initiative, really stepping back into my roots, so to speak, as a forester, but also bringing with me all of that nonprofit leadership experience and the organizational development and all of that. So I'm really excited about how I can lend a hand towards the White Oak, or to the White Oak Initiative as we move forward.
So for those who don't know what the organization is, what is the White Oak Initiative and what is their mission?
Yeah, sure. So the White Oak Initiative is really this cool initiative where a whole bunch of diverse stakeholders have come together around the idea of conservation of white oak, right? And so the mission is really to bring this group together for the long-term sustainability of America's white oak forests. And of course, that involves making sure that the economic, social, and environmental pieces of all of that are in place as well. What this group does on the larger scale, so it's a range-wide initiative, all the eastern United States.
Okay.
What we do is everything from education and outreach about white oak management to policy work. So for example, we're working on the Hill with some language in the 2023 Farm Bill about white oak management. And we're also driving, really driving towards on the ground work with our partners to make sure that landowners, foresters, loggers, anybody who's doing this sort of work understands what it means to manage for white oak, because it's more complex, right, than managing for other species. And the real reason that we're doing all of this is that data shows right now there are plenty of white oak trees out there. We've got a good crop of white oak, but trends are showing that regeneration isn't happening, right? So across most of the range of white oak, they're being outcompeted by sugar maple, beech, invasive species. All the changes to land management that have been happening culturally, over the past couple of decades are really leading to a situation where white oak just isn't able to compete and regenerate and bring in those next cohorts of age classes, for future use.
Wow. Okay. So about the organization, we'll stay on that topic for a moment. How is it structured and how is it funded? It's called an initiative. What is the structure there?
Yeah, sure. So thanks. So the White Oak Initiative is structured almost like a nonprofit, but we're not a nonprofit. We have a board of directors, okay? And the board is comprised of stakeholders from across the spectrum of white oak. We have industry folks, we've got other nonprofit and conservation organizations, as partners, university representatives, landowners. All of those folks are coming together with this initiative under the American Forest Foundation. So when it was first started, it was the triad of the University of Kentucky, American Forest Foundation, and Dendra Fund, which is a seed fund, a nonprofit seed fund that's related to Brown Forman and the Brown family, Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
So those three came together and said, hey, we've got an issue coming up. Let's bring as many people to the table as we can and make that happen. So that was the original group. It was called a steering committee at the point. It wasn't a board of directors yet. That steering committee developed the assessment and conservation plan that really took a hard look at white oak across the range and then came up with, the tools and ideas to implement management moving forward to reverse this trend of lack of regeneration. Today, where we stand as an initiative is we've become more formalized. So now that that plan is out there, we're seeing it's time to get to work on the ground, right? So the steering committee became a board of directors. Our goal over the next several years is to step out away from the American Forest Foundation as a fiscal sponsor to our own nonprofit structure.
Okay.
That'll help us with fundraising. That'll help us with all the sorts of things that we're just not quite able to do yet, totally on our own. And speaking of funding, I'm not sure if you asked yet, but how we're funded.
Yes.
When we were kicked off, Dendra Fund was a piece of that, but the spirits industry really came to the table. So
Right.
Brown Forman, Sazerac, Beam Suntory, they all stepped up to bring some funding behind this. And then we also, as an initiative, received Region 8 and Forest Service Region 8 and Forest Service Region 9 received landscape scale restoration grants to help fund not only the initiative and the working of the initiative, but some on the ground projects as well.
Okay.
That was probably more than you wanted to hear, but
no, that was great. I have two follow-up questions, Jason.
Sure.
So just in case anyone is living under a log, why is this important to Jack Daniels and that industry?
Great question, and I would say that 98% of foresters probably understand this, but just in case.
Yeah.
If you want to have bourbon, you've got to have brand new oak barrels, right? And white oak is the species that works best for those oak barrels, not just from the flavor profile standpoint, but from the tyloses that keep the liquid inside the barrel instead of leaching out. So you can't make bourbon without white oak, and if we're not regenerating white oak, that might be a problem in the future, right? And so I like to say I'm doing this for my kids. I want them to be able to enjoy the same things I'm enjoying today.
Sure. Well, I think we all are. Yeah. and so, so one of my questions for you is, what is the biggest challenge that White Oak Initiative faces? You mentioned regeneration. That's something that's a species' greatest challenge. Would you say that's the initiative's greatest challenge? Or are there other challenges as an organization that you're facing?
Yeah, great question. They're linked, right? So yes, regeneration is the problem, but me as the executive director, I can't do a whole lot by myself, with all of this. So the greatest challenge that we have facing us now that we're going into the implementation phase is to build the on-the-ground networks that can take the educational materials that we're producing, that can take, the policy work that hopefully results in money for landowners, getting that out into the field and doing the management on the ground. So the link between lack of regeneration and white oak that's missing is that network on the ground. And that's really one of our first big issues to tackle, is how to build that out. We're talking with partners like the Sustainable Forest Initiative, SFI, to see if we can utilize some of their networks, for example, so that we're not starting from scratch, but what can we leverage that's already out there to make sure that white oak management is part of what everybody's doing.
Right. Yeah. When did you start?
When did I start?
Yes.
Like 7 to 8 days ago. I mean, I've been, less than 3 months at this point. So,
okay. So in those 3 months, what has been your biggest surprise so far?
My biggest surprise is really how many people have come together in a really excited way to address this issue, right? So when I look around the boardroom, for example, I see people coming from potentially competing interests, just from a conservation standpoint, but also direct competitors in the business world. So to have Sazerac and Brown Forman, in the same room, all working towards.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
is huge, right? Well, and Gifford Pinchot, we all know Gifford.
Yes.
I have a quote on the wall here that's where conflicting interests must be reconciled, the question shall always be answered from the standpoint of the greatest good of the greatest number in the long run. And when I look around the table, I mean, that we're living it out right here with the White Oak Initiative. So
I mean, it's a common,
on the greatest good. Yeah.
Right. It's a common, everyone is working towards the same goal.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if we have to work at things that might sometimes be crosswise with what our 100% goal is. So finding the middle ground of white oak has been a pretty special thing, and I think that's what's most exciting and surprising to me.
Okay. Yeah, that's neat. So you come on 3 months ago. What does that mean for White Oak Initiative? Are you, and you mentioned, maybe moving away from this triad and stepping out on their own. So what are you guys gearing up for?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing I'll mention is I'm the first full-time executive director of the initiative.
Oh, okay.
So the board realized, all right, we've got this plan. This is a serious thing. Let's really invest in making sure that we have someone who can be the leader of this organization moving it forward, instead of just being part of, another job, so to speak.
Right.
So with that initial formation and then everybody coming together and bringing me on, now we are ready to step into that next chapter of our existence. And so as we gear up for the next phase, what we're working on internally, in addition to figuring out how to become our own standalone nonprofit, are things like, how are we going to staff this initiative? How are we going to bring the right people on at the right times to address the conservation strategies? Do we need to bring someone on to do policy work, to make sure that funding continues to come through? Do we need to hire fundraisers, right? Because all of this costs money to do. So that's the sort of work that we're doing internally. Externally, like I mentioned before, we're really working hard on building those networks so that we have a whole slew of partners coming together to do the work on the ground.
So in those, long-term goals, right? In your goal planning of the next 5 years or the next 10 years, becoming your own nonprofit entity certainly sounds like it's up there. What are some other goals you have for White Oak Initiative over the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, so the most immediate goals, Morgan, are related to those landscape scale restoration grants that I talked about earlier, right? They've really given us the guideposts for how we're going to move this initiative forward, and some of the outcomes that those are funding are things like making sure that forest practitioners and logging operators are educated about what it means to be in the woods with white oak and manage those to encourage regeneration. We're reaching landowners with that same information. Here's what lots of landowners don't even know a white oak from a red oak, right? So the first step is let's get people educated about what the tree is, what the benefits are that they provide, and then start to talk about management, but then taking the next step of connecting those landowners to the resources like consulting foresters who can help develop the management plan, and the funding through programs like EQIP through the NRCS that can help with some cost share to make that work happen. The other thing we're working on in the short term here is setting up some demonstration sites across the range of white oak so that folks can actually go out on the ground and see what it looks like as you go through the process. Part of a landowner survey that we did through the assessment and conservation plan said, hey, the landowners are buying land for aesthetic purposes, right? They want the beauty of it.
Right.
Sometimes forest management isn't beautiful right away, but it's nice to show landowners what something looks like 3-5 years down the road so that they can visualize what they're really getting into.
Absolutely. Right.
Why? And then finally, the last thing I'll mention is that, in the short term, let's get in the farm bill. Let's get some white oak language in the farm bill to make sure there's money coming down the pipe for that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, very good. So for those who are listening and reading and they want to become involved in this effort, how can they do that? Businesses or private individuals, how can they get involved?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. That's the other big thing we're tackling, right? So the initial phase of this was the steering committee. It was this group of people who were moving forward. I can't tell you when I got here how many people started reaching out saying, how can I get involved, right? And we just didn't quite have the structure for that. So that's what I'm starting to build out. I see a lot of ways people can get involved in the White Oak Initiative. I see a lot of ways corporations can get involved. What I would really love to see is this being a really inclusive group of people that just really amplifies the message about white oak conservation. So we're looking for people on the ground that can help deliver trainings, for example. Whether those are partner organizations or foresters on the ground that are willing to do some landowner days or working with with loggers. We're looking for those white oak management success stories that we can promote as best practices, or hey, here's someone in Tennessee that did some really good work. Can you replicate that in Kentucky? Can you do the same thing in, Southern Illinois, for example? So we're looking for people to send us those stories. We're definitely looking for advocates. So I keep bringing up the Farm Bill. Write the letters, to your elected officials. Hey, forest management is important.
Right.
White oak is great. White oak is sort of that charismatic species, if you will. Everybody understands
that charismatic megafauna. Yeah, charismatic megaflora.
Megaflora, yeah. So really, you can use bourbon, you can use all the wildlife that depend on white oak as the message, but really what that means at the end of the day is just good forest management, right? If you're managing for white oak well, you're managing your forest well.
I was just going to say that, Jason, when you were finished, about how folks can get involved in the landowner education piece, because white oak management is forest management. And like you said, or all these, FIA, all these surveys are showing, extension agencies across the country, these landowner surveys, it's aesthetics. And they think a wall of green is healthy. They just don't know. They simply need education, like you talked about.
Yep, absolutely. The one group I didn't talk about, Morgan, corporations, how can they get involved? We've had corporations get involved in some tree planting projects, for example, so that on the ground volunteer work through local partners. We're not going to plant our way out of this issue, right? So that's just one piece of all of this. But one of the biggest things that corporations can do, and putting on the executive director hat here, is we do need some financial support to make this happen. And so investing in the White Oak Initiative financially definitely helps us continue that momentum, moving forward of white oak conservation. And we certainly invite those conversations as well.
Right, of course. So what do you hope listeners and readers take away from this conversation today?
Yeah, I think top of that list is really just awareness, right? Awareness about the importance of white oak and all the benefits that they provide to this world. But also awareness about the need for active and fairly tactical management, for white oak, to make sure that we have trees that are regenerating strongly, quickly. They're out competing, the poplars and the red maples of the world, so that we continue to have this resource into the future. So it's all about awareness at the end of the day. Very
good. All right. Well, thanks, Jason. Thanks so much for your time today and stepping up to this interview after 3 months at White Oak Initiative. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Morgan.